very latest on what these moves from the White House mean for Canada going forward. We're joined by Pedro Antunes, Chief Economist of the Conference Board of Canada. Great to have you with us this morning.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to get and dive into how this affects Canada, but first, let's start with how this international reaction is happening this morning. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying his country is going to keep a, quote, cool head in trade negotiations with the U.S. China, on the other hand, says it's going to respond with countermeasures. With trade now being global, how could implications of Trump's tariffs globally unfold and infect us here?
Well, I mean, the U.S. here is set for essentially a recession or very close to a recession if these tariffs in any way are applied and last. Again, we're hopeful that these are negotiating tactics that somehow we'll see these ease up as we go forward. Otherwise, we are going to see a U.S. recession and a global recession, certainly a global slowdown, and that's not very good news at all for Canada. I mean, we were spared perhaps on Liberation Day from specific tariffs, but we are still already facing, as you just mentioned, a number of tariffs, including a new set of tariffs on autos. And on top of that, we're going to see our biggest trading partner really reel from essentially a hit to inflation and, all of this uncertainty that is going to affect consumer spending and U.S. business spending. This is not going to make the U.S. wealthier. This is going to make the U.S. much, much poorer. So, yes, very concerning for our own economy and, in fact, for everyone across the world here.
Well, it wasn't clear at first, as we were talking about on so-called Liberation Day, but this morning we do now have a more streamlined account of what has changed for Canada. Can you outline that for us, for people who are watching this morning who may have saw this press conference yesterday and honestly were as confused as some of the people doing the live coverage of, wait a second, are we affected? Are we not affected? How does this impact us?
Well, in fact, what we learned yesterday was we were not on that list, and in fact, the White House set some rule, essentially some messaging out that says that, in fact, all goods under CUSMA will be essentially that are under CUSMA will be applied no tariff at all. This is with some exceptions, of course. We already have tariffs on steel and aluminum. We have tariffs on non-U.S. value added that crosses the border on autos. So it's not quite a 25% tariff across the board, but nonetheless, it is large enough that this, as you mentioned, is already going to halt production and exports to the U.S. I mean, it's just non-competitive. Aside from that, let's not forget we have ongoing tariffs, new tariffs with China on agri-food products. So this is just a buildup in this, essentially, this anti-trade patterns that we're seeing, and we're bearing the brunt of a number of these things. And it's not over yet. Of course, even if we, we're exempt here from any new tariffs yesterday, we've been on this ongoing turntable around tariffs applied, tariffs not applied, and I think the threats are going to continue. And I think, again, this goes into that sense of uncertainty. If we look at both consumer and business, in fact, consumer confidence hit record low levels in March. We hit lower than we were during the pandemic, and that's really bad for consumer spending, and certainly investment and business confidence is also down at very essentially recession levels. So all of this plays very, very badly in what is already a soft outlook for Canada's economy, really.
I want to get your take before we go on Prime Minister Carney's comments yesterday, saying the U.S. signaled there will be additional measures on strategic sectors like lumber and pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. We don't talk a lot about that when we're discussing trade and tariffs these days, but what did Mr. Carney mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think he must have heard something in his conversations with President Trump. We heard about the banking sector. Certainly during President Trump's speech yesterday, we heard about our supply managed dairy sector. And, I just think this is, again, more and more uncertainty to come among all of these little pieces and bits and pieces that we're hearing about. And I think this is all going to push towards once we get to renegotiating CUSMA, if we actually get a chance to do that or even want to do that. I don't know whether that agreement even holds water anymore. But I think this is all more and more of a push And personally, I still believe that this is some sort of tactic to try and create this uncertainty to move investment on its own. In other words, force businesses to essentially move their investment south of the border, in an effort to kind of revive some of these sectors that President Trump is talking about. But it's not going to work. This is a very dangerous road he's taken on with these tariff announcements across the world.
Yeah, he's been very clear that that's his motivation. And as you point out, we're starting to see some of his strategy, but whether or not that works long term, I think there's a lot of evidence saying it's problematic globally. Pedro Antunes, chief economist of the Conference Board of Canada, we really appreciate your time and insight. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Anne-Marie. Thanks.